A previous incident, widely discussed, details a series of unidentified flying objects over Washington, D.C. in 1952. This significant UFO event, occurring just 2 years prior, sets a crucial backdrop for the unfolding narrative. The year is 1954, and the United States finds itself navigating a profoundly complex global landscape. The Second World War had concluded approximately 9 years earlier, yet the Korean War persisted, and threats loomed in numerous other nations. The Cold War gripped the world, marked by the escalating growth of nuclear armaments and widespread anxieties concerning espionage. A pervasive fear had taken root, demonizing the Soviets, or Russians as they were then known, fueled by a torrent of rumors and fabricated stories. Adding to this volatile atmosphere, the infamous Roswell incident of 1947 had also transpired, an event whose implications would only fully emerge decades later, but which had undoubtedly left its mark. Another incident involving U.S. Army aircraft further contributed to the prevailing sense of unease. It was, in many respects, an exceptionally tense period. Despite a robust economic well-being, the specter of nuclear attack and the potential annihilation of the planet loomed heavily in the public consciousness. Meanwhile, the idea of Roswell, though not widely popularized until the 1980s, had, by the 1950s, become an obscure but acknowledged occurrence. It was within this climate, in the United States of America in 1954, that an extraordinary letter arrived at a rather unusual office. The recipient was the Borderland Science Research Associates, an organization now known as the Borderland Foundation. This group comprised individuals dedicated to the study of metaphysics, hypnosis, telepathy, supernatural phenomena, and, to a lesser extent, UFOs. At the time, the foundation itself did not command widespread credibility, with many questioning the veracity of its claims. Yet, the incoming letter proved to be even more peculiar. Penned by a certain Gerald Light, the correspondence was addressed to a Mr. Midlane in San Diego, California. It began, "Dear friend, I have just returned from Muroc, and the report is true, devastatingly true." Muroc, it must be noted, was the Muroc Air Test Center, presently recognized as Edwards Air Force Base. The letter continued. "I made the trip in the company of Franklin Allen of the Hearst newspapers, of Elvin Nurse of the Brooklyn Institute, who was financial advisor to Truman, and of Bishop McIntyre of Los Angeles. Please keep these names confidential for the moment." Light then recounted a harrowing experience. "When we were allowed to enter the restricted section, after about 6 hours, in which they checked everything possible, events, incidents, personal aspects, life, etc., I had the feeling that the world had come to an end with absolute realism. Because I had never seen so many humans in a state of complete collapse and confusion, at the same time as they realized that their own world, in reality, their own world, had come to an end. The reality of that other plane, of those aeroforms, now and forever, have been removed from the world of speculation and are painfully part of the consciousness of every scientific and political leader of that group. During my 2-day visit, I was able to see 5 separate and distinct types of flying devices studied and handled by Air Force officers with the assistance and permission of the ethereals. And I have no words to express my reaction. It has finally happened, and now it is a matter of history. President Eisenhower, as you will know, was taken to Muro at night during his recent visit to Palm Springs. And it is my conviction that he will skip the conflicts between different authorities and will address the people via radio or television. According to what I was able to hear, an official statute, or at least an official declaration to the country, is being prepared for mid-May. The essence of the letter suggested that its author Gerald Light, along with 4 other prominent individuals, had been present at the Muroc Air Base, the U.S. Air Force's Muroc Air Test Center, concurrently with President Dwight D. Eisenhower in a meeting that included extraterrestrial beings. The remainder of the letter described the profound bewilderment of the scientists and other figures present. their minds racing to comprehend how such a monumental revelation could ever be communicated to the public. This initial correspondence, however, raises several critical questions, beginning with its sender. Gerald Light was known as a sensitive seer, a practitioner of astral travel, and a specialist in paranormal phenomena. From a conventional perspective, his credibility might be considered questionable. Sent to an association dedicated to esoteric investigations, originating from an individual claiming shamanic abilities who asserted an invitation to the most significant meeting in human history, the narrative contained elements that, on the surface, appeared entirely incongruous. Yet, despite its initial fantastical appearance, the letter possesses a surprising internal logic. First, the context of such a meeting necessitates the presence of numerous military personnel. Assuming an unprecedented encounter between the President of the United States and alien entities, the timing becomes critical. The Roswell incident had already occurred, potentially initiating not merely a meeting, but humanity's initial contact with extraterrestrial life, confirming the existence of beings beyond our world. Secondly, the widely documented Washington invasion, where numerous craft engaged in intricate maneuvers with Air Force planes, evading radar detection and identification, strongly suggests preceding interactions with the UFO phenomenon. This period, therefore, appears to be a logical juncture for such an event. Beyond timing, the composition of attendees at a meeting of this magnitude is equally telling. Would such a high-level discussion involve military leaders? Undoubtedly. Technicians. Gerald Light's letter explicitly states that Air Force officers and others were manipulating non-terrestrial devices. Would scientists from military facilities, privy to national secrets, also be present? And who else would be included? If a public declaration at the press level were imminent, a highly trusted media representative would be essential. Franklin Allen, the representative of the Hearst newspapers, was an 80-year-old man with a long history of government service, a highly respected journalist, and a personal friend of Dwight Eisenhower. His presence, perhaps to strategize the handling of such a story, makes considerable sense. The counsel of an economic expert would also be crucial. The discovery of extraterrestrial life and its presence among us would undoubtedly send global stock markets plummeting. What measures could mitigate such an economic upheaval? Finally, the religious implications. While the United States embraced diverse faiths, Catholicism represented a globally prominent and influential religion with an established structure that could serve in such a scenario. Bishop McIntyre, mentioned in the letter, was the papal delegate representing Pope Pius XIII, who, at that time, did not travel outside Rome but relied on his delegates for critical matters. McIntyre was precisely the individual who would be summoned to such a meeting. Thus, while the letter might be dismissed as the product of Gerald Light's conspiratorial and fervent imagination, an individual predisposed to believing and sharing such information with a like-minded association, its details exhibit a peculiar logic. The timing, and especially a specific detail mentioned by Light, immediately triggers further investigation. His assertion that President Eisenhower was urgently taken to Muro during the night of his recent visit to Palm Springs. This detail proves to be pivotal. In 1954, Dwight Eisenhower, affectionately known as Ike, was an exceptionally beloved figure in the United States, revered alongside his wife, Mamie. He was not merely a political leader, but a national exemplar. A celebrated general who led the Allied forces to victory in Europe during World War II, he commanded immense respect, outranking figures like Patton and Montgomery. His presidential victories, achieved twice, were by absolute majorities. Yet a lesser-known story exists. At one point, the White House press services announced that Eisenhower would take a vacation in Palm Springs, California. This announcement raised eyebrows. Firstly, he had just returned from a hunting trip in Georgia. Secondly, Palm Springs in 1954 was a small town of barely 8,000 inhabitants, hardly a presidential retreat. The suddenness of the trip meant there was no hotel large enough to accommodate the president, his entourage, and security detail. They were forced to rent a house which proved unsuitable, eventually leading them to stay at the home of an acquaintance. The setting lacked appropriate security measures. Everything appeared hastily improvised. Then, on the night of February 20th, 1954, Eisenhower vanished. His sudden disappearance led to rumors of his death, given his age and health. A press note, reportedly issued by a U.S. media outlet that very night, announced his passing. He would not reappear until the late afternoon of February 21st, claiming an emergency dental issue. A broken tooth during dinner necessitated his urgent departure for treatment. To substantiate his story, a dentist was presented. This explanation, however, struck many as improbable, requiring a trip to an air base for dental work, as it was supposedly the only facility with a dentist available. The entire sequence of events was highly unusual, yet it precisely coincided with Gerald Light's letter, adding a layer of unexpected consistency to the information. While Light did not explicitly detail what he saw, he referred to them as ethereals, and the letter clearly implies extraterrestrial beings. Nevertheless, the possibility remained that this was all a simple misunderstanding. Light, having read about Eisenhower's real and publicly reported disappearance, might have fabricated an elaborate story to share with his esoteric Foundation friends. However, the matter does not conclude there, as this was neither the sole correspondence nor the only assertion regarding this purported meeting. Bill Cooper, a prominent conspiracy theorist, spent years presenting various reports and making extraordinary claims, one of which, he maintained, ultimately cost him his life. Cooper long contended that the U.S. Army and Air Force had established two projects: Project Sigma, focused on the recovery of extraterrestrial technology, and Project Plato, dedicated to contact and extraterrestrial diplomacy. These projects, he claimed, converged in the 1950s. While both projects have been officially reclassified or attributed different purposes, Cooper asserted their reality and their subservience to Majestic 12, an organization whose existence was later supported by evidence uncovered by researcher Stanton Friedman. Cooper claimed that around 1953, following the incidents over Washington, D.S., contact and communication with extraterrestrials had been established. This communication, he suggested, was achieved through radio signals employing binary code. The rationale behind this method stemmed from the hundreds of radio enthusiasts who utilized shortwave frequencies to monitor government communications, often intercepting reports on space tests and experimental aircraft flights. For instance, when Chuck Yeager famously broke the sound barrier, the news was often disseminated not by official agencies, but by these radio amateurs. According to Cooper, the extraterrestrial contact was similarly coded, making it incomprehensible to casual listeners, yet the core message was a request to meet with the President of the United States. This narrative, reminiscent of a cinematic plot, gains further intrigue through Cooper's background. He asserted that he discovered this information while working for the U.S. Army in classified programs. Unlike many self-proclaimed conspiracy theorists with alleged military experience, Bill Cooper was indeed a genuine military man. He served with the Naval Intelligence Team of the Pacific Command, holding the position of intelligence officer for the Supreme Commander of the Pacific Command. In this capacity, he had access to a vast array of confidential documents during the 1970s. Cooper steadfastly maintained that on February 21, 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower, or Ike, personally met with aliens. This encounter, he claimed, took place at the Murrow Test Field near Palm Springs, California, and unfolded in distinct stages. The initial meeting involved one type of alien, followed by encounters with three other distinct extraterrestrial species, indicating it was not a singular event. Cooper asserted that the first, most spectacular meeting on February 20, 21, involved beings of blonde appearance, described as entirely white, with even their lips lacking color and of considerable height. These entities, he stated, arrived in peace, offering no technology or weaponry. Their sole request was the complete disarmament of the planet's nuclear arsenal, in exchange for assistance in social and ecological reconstitution. This concept, often associated with Brothers of Light narratives of the 1990s, was, according to Cooper, presented to Eisenhower during the 1954 encounter. However, this occurred at the height of the Cold War. Both the Soviets and the Americans possessed nuclear weapons. Consequently, President Eisenhower reportedly rejected the deal. Cooper stated that the Americans refused to dismantle their nuclear capabilities, arguing that doing so would leave the entire planet vulnerable. In part, this reasoning held merit. Not only due to the Soviet nuclear threat, but also considering the potential for confrontation with these advanced aliens, the human forces would be defenseless without their nuclear deterrent. Following this initial encounter, these tall, slender, and very pale aliens reportedly departed. In subsequent meetings, President Eisenhower was no longer at the forefront, with other military assistants attending. Cooper claimed a final agreement was eventually reached. Cooper, whose father was a high-ranking Air Force officer reportedly present at the encounter, later discovered these documents while compiling intelligence data for the Pacific Command. Again, the narrative veers into the realm of conspiracy, echoing themes from novels and films. Bill Cooper, a figure often considered eccentric, served for 21 years in the U.S. Army and Navy. His military service was well documented, with records detailing his assignments and duties. He was undeniably a genuine military veteran. In a profoundly strange turn of events, in June 2001, Cooper published an article predicting a major attack on the United States, asserting that Osama bin Laden would be blamed, but that the accusation would be false. 3 months later, in September, the attack on the Twin Towers occurred. In November of that same year, Bill Cooper was fatally shot by police at his home. The circumstances of his death remain unclear. Cooper had reportedly called the police to report vandals at his garage. When officers arrived, reportedly in civilian clothes and without sirens or lights, Cooper allegedly confronted them, shouting a warning about the police. He was then killed, and one officer also died in the incident. The man who predicted the 9/11 attacks and the subsequent scapegoating of Osama bin Laden was the same individual who adamantly claimed that Dwight Eisenhower had indeed met with Nordic aliens, as these beings are often described. The story does not end there. Commander Charles L. Suggs of the U.S. Navy, in his final moments of life in 1987, claimed to have been alongside Eisenhower during the 1954 meeting. Suggs provided highly precise details concerning the aliens' appearance and the encounter itself. He recounted witnessing a flying saucer arrive, landing on the runway via a tripod mechanism. 2 aliens descended. One remained near the craft while the other advanced towards the president, maintaining a respectful distance. During this time, military personnel were positioned everywhere, with several combat aircraft on the runway, their engines running, all prepared for any contingency. Yet the communication remained calm. Suggs corroborated the description of the beings as very white, with white lips and no eyebrows, emphasizing their non-aggressive demeanor. Crucially, Suggs also asserted that communication was not verbal but telepathic, a detail that aligns precisely with Cooper's and other accounts. He claimed that the visitors' initial demand was the elimination of atomic weapons, offering in return benefits such as well-being, health, advanced medicines, cures, and planetary restoration. A particularly striking detail was their promise to keep the Greys away. According to Suggs, this event transpired on the Muro runway, later known as Edwards Air Force Base. All these accounts, despite emerging at different times and from individuals who were not collaborating, presented converging details, each contributing unique information. Gerald Light's letter initiated the narrative, but subsequent testimonies continued to add layers of corroborating, logical information. Next came John Lear, a co-founder of Learjet, a renowned CIA pilot and a test pilot for both the Navy and the Army, known for his work with Lockheed Martin and other prominent entities. Lear claimed that a meeting indeed occurred, but with a crucial distinction. He asserted that Eisenhower was present only at the initial encounter. Subsequent arrangements, he stated, were made by military personnel, and these agreements were with the Greys. The Nordics, he explained, had been set aside due to their demand for nuclear disarmament, a condition the Greys did not impose. In exchange, the Greys offered technology and various other benefits, but they requested one specific concession: permission to abduct humans and animals, taking samples of living beings from the planet. While this may sound like pure fiction, it constituted Lear's assertion. Furthermore, Lear claimed that the presence of the Greys encircling the planet and their eventual contact was fully known, even by the Nordics themselves. This brings us back to a recurring pattern. Multiple individuals, at different times, presenting distinct pieces of information, yet with particular details that align. These were individuals who, by virtue of their positions, could have plausibly been privy to such events. They consistently reveal the same core truth: an encounter involving President Eisenhower, a notion that, within its context, makes a certain sense. Yet the narrative continues. Robert Dean, while serving with the Supreme European Command of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, discovered a truly extraordinary document. This document detailed Eisenhower's encounter and was classified above top secret, accessible only to individuals with specific elevated security clearances. It formed part of an ongoing investigation. Dean himself would later declare that during his 27 years in U.S. intelligence services, he encountered several reports that led him to a singular conclusion. First, the Nordics were rejected. Second, the February 1954 encounter was unsuccessful and yielded no agreement. The Nordics withdrew but remained a presence. This revelation sparked immense curiosity. Dean further stated that there were 4 distinct alien species: the Nordics, the Greys, a reptilian-like species, and another group described as very large with small heads. This report, according to Dean, essentially corroborated all the preceding accounts. Moreover, he claimed that in November 1954, approximately 9 months after Eisenhower's encounter with the Nordics, an agreement was reached at Holloman Air Force Base with the Grey beings. This deal with the Greys, known within intelligence circles, reportedly assigned control of the agreement to the Majestic 12 program. The agreement stipulated that the Greys were authorized to abduct individuals for experiments, sampling, and analysis, with the assurance that these individuals would later be returned. All abductions were to be reported to Majestic 12. This seems almost beyond belief. Further details emerged from Phil Schneider, who not only confirmed the existence of an agreement but also provided its name, the Greada Treaty. As this agreement was not authorized by the U.S. Congress, it was handled internally, in an ultra-secret manner known only to a select few, the Majestic 12. This arrangement effectively placed it above the President of the United States and the highest echelons of government. Insightfully, one of the 5-star generals, the highest rank in the United States, once remarked in a West Point speech, "The military remain. They change every 4 years." Thus, the control group, the architects of the Greada Treaty, were the military. Knowing that the military would not release this information, President Eisenhower, in his farewell address before leaving the presidency, made a veiled reference to forces that opposed freedom of expression, implying a suppression of truth. The Greada Treaty, as described, was an agreement permitting the abduction of individuals every 10 years. Although this term required confirmation, it is widely believed that the extraterrestrial parties did not adhere to it, continuing abductions indefinitely. Some abductees reportedly returned, while others did not. Animals were also taken, and interaction sometimes involved aggression. Their activities were reportedly kept in check only because the Nordics remained present and could exert a containing influence. Yet another significant figure contributes to this complex narrative: Colonel Philip Corso. A decorated military officer with extensive service in both the Army and Air Force, stationed in numerous locations including Vietnam, Corso made a profound claim in 1998. He asserted that the Greada Agreement was not a treaty in the conventional sense, but rather a form of surrender, as the terms dictated by the Greys were accepted. Philip Corso was no fantasist or purveyor of unsubstantiated claims. He was a high-ranking military official with a very high level of access to classified information. He declared it was a surrender, but in exchange, astonishing technologies were received. In his final declaration of 1998, Corso added that, as part of the Greada Agreement, the United States acquired technology that led to the development of fiber optics. The laser beam, massive data storage devices, microchips, processors, and advanced materials such as Kevlar and carbon fiber. It is important to note that these technologies were not exclusively delivered to the U.S. While the Greada Agreement was with the U.S., similar agreements were reportedly extended to other nations. While these claims might appear to be fantasy, Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, even until recent years, maintained that her great-grandfather had confirmed the agreement's existence and their direct involvement to her parents. The gravest implication is that the Greada Agreement, in some form, may still be active. Considering all these testimonies, one might initially dismiss them as the fabrications of a group of eccentrics. However, a brief re-evaluation of the sources is warranted. Gerald Light, though enigmatic and involved in shamanic and astral pursuits, initiated the narrative. Bill Cooper, a conspiracy theorist, was a genuine military intelligence officer with access to numerous classified reports. His prophetic warning in June 2001 about a massive attack on the United States, which eerily coincided with the 9/11 events, and his subsequent death, lend a chilling weight to his claims. Then there is John Lear, a CIA test pilot, a secret man who tested ultra-secret aircraft, placing him in a position to possess such knowledge. Furthermore, we have Colonel Philip Corso, an intelligence officer, and Commander Charles Suggs, also a member of intelligence. These are not mere fantasists, they are individuals from high levels of military and intelligence who collectively claim that in 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials, leading to an active and ongoing agreement. Coinciding with these historical claims, a mere 2 days prior, the UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, report was released to the U.S. Congress. Comprising essentially 9 pages, it offered little substantial information, confirming the persistent secrecy surrounding these subjects. While this documentary may seem to delve into the realm of the fanciful, it presents testimonies from individuals who were uniquely positioned to acquire such information, alongside intriguing, circumstantial evidence that could potentially corroborate the theory. And then there is the peculiar logic of Gerald Light's letter, especially when considered in light of the alleged famous encounter between Pope John VIII and an alien in the gardens of Castel Gandolfo in 1961, approximately 7 years later. But that, indeed, is another story entirely.